This is Business Anonymous. I started doing business since I was 18, full-time at least, but I've started doing business selling trading cards even when I was in school since I was 10 years old. I'm doing this solo podcast anonymously so that no one that I work with see this and that there's no conflict of interest. This is for business people and I'll share my philosophies, frameworks, thought processes, everything. Profit is unnatural. I heard this from a video of someone fairly recently, and this is top of mind for me today because of the recent medical issue that I've basically been recovering from around 2 or 3 weeks ago. I haven't done any sales, and I think I mentioned yesterday that as a result, there are no new major sales. So let me give some context. If you take from 1st January until right now, year to date, 8 February 2026, we're at a net loss of a few $1,000s, I think. But last year we did more than $500,000 in revenue in USD and a decent amount in profit. I went over some of the changes in assets and cash over the last 3 weeks. I spent about, I think, 2 hours today on only doing this. Not really like doing anything business wise, but kind of just like analyzing the last 3 weeks of cash and cash flows and all that kind of stuff. So my personal living expenses is already fairly low, as low as I think it can be, to the point where if I try to cut it in half, which I'm sure I could, the difference would be marginal in terms of like, especially in terms of the expenses that we have on the business side. But I think that the main thing is from a personal side, after my medical thing gets done, I need to stop getting distracted by any other stuff and just like go full in on work. So recently, for example, just yesterday, I rejected a vacation or a trip to Cape Town, and I'm going to try to cram my medical recovery. I have already set a meeting for myself for next Thursday morning. So, I'm counting on the fact that I'll be recovered well enough to start taking Zoom meetings at least by next Thursday. And from a business side, I don't think that there are any like expenses that we have to really cut there. I was thinking if maybe we should pause, some like finance services, or if we should like terminate any sort of like employees who are underperforming. But I think that right now, at least for the next month in February, I'm going to leave things as it is. And I think that the main constraint is probably a lack of major sales. The the kind of like expenses that we have now, it's not different from 6 months ago or whatever. And the last 12 months prior to this year's January and February, like last year was actually pretty good. So I don't think that expenses are the issue. And I think that if, I invest or spend less on marketing or other expenses, it may actually have a downward effect in what I want to do. Like, I think the main difference or change from last year until the recent 5 weeks of this year, the main change is that I've been on my medical thing and distracted and not really like been doing sales. I think that's the main difference. On my kind of like medical recovery, I'm obviously doing a lot of reading, watching videos, and doing research and prepping for this year. And I actually thought that content was going to be the most important thing for me. Like, I actually thought about it and I was like, okay, content would be the number one priority. If I have a sales meeting and something planned for content, I'm going to turn down the sales meeting and only do content. But I think that at this stage, that cannot happen. Like, as much as I want to think like long term and everything, I think that you have to kind of focus on not making a loss for the month, obviously, and you got to go hard. And content has to be something that you kind of like work on in your free time, but like today is the most important. So as much as people want to say that you got to work in the future and you got to plan long term, which I agree with, the priority still has to be on today. Because if you lose money today, or if you don't survive today, then you'll never make it to tomorrow, right? So even though I spent the last 2 or 3 weeks kind of like thinking that after I recover, content will be the number one priority, I think that's kind of changed. And I think the number one priority would kind of be doing sales and taking as many meetings as I can. I'm going to be shadowing my 2 sales reps, and I'm going to be jumping in if I see them needing help or if they're missing something in the sales meeting. And at any spare time that I have, which may be early in the morning, after 6, late in the evenings, that's when I'm going to be filming the content, editing it, doing research, on how I can make better content, communicating with editors to make sure that things get done properly, and just like posting all of this stuff. So I think I will kind of like have my priorities in cadence set this way when I'm recovered, hopefully in the next 1 to 2 weeks time. Right now with our expenses, like if you include payroll and include, let's say for example, my credit card bill, so not even including rent, my personal rent, or not even including rent of any sort, it already comes up to like 10,000 or so dollars. And so in this case, like if I don't start actually like focusing and moving my attention back to revenue generating activities, then like just like being at a loss of $10,000 per month, I think does not make any sense. I may as well not have a team or cut my team in half. But obviously, if I want to keep growing, then I need to at least like maintain the team where I try to focus on like media or brand. So that's kind of like my thought process as to why content would be number two and day-to-day sales or month-to-month sales would be number one, despite me knowing that brand is like the most important thing for business in theory. But I think in practice, like you still need to keep the today or this month's expenses at top of mind, and not to mention that when you pay for vendors, like for GPS software, when you pay refer partners and others, like expenses already comes up to around like 15 to 20,000, right? So you're not actually losing 10,000 a month, more like losing 15 to 20K per month if you don't do anything, if you don't generate any sort of revenue. So I think that's really important. Lastly, as a quick side note, not really about business, but if anyone, like if you have like personal assets, especially if, let's say for example, you have, assets in two different currencies. So like if you have it in US dollars and Singapore dollars, like 200,000 USD, if you have it invested in the stock market, if you have even a minor fluctuation in the USD to SGD conversion rate, this could lead to like a 3,000 Singapore dollar difference, over like a short 3 week period, which is kind of crazy because it's definitely a noticeable amount of money. But this is based off like 200,000 USD of invested assets, so kind of around 250,000 SGD, like 250,000. So kind of crazy to think about how when you have a bigger number invested, a small change in currency conversion rates, which I think the USD to SGD conversion rate has been fairly like stable, but it's crazy to think that even a minor fluctuation over 3 weeks can result in a noticeable difference in change. Anyways, to kind of bring this back to the point and wrap it up, profit is unnatural. And so as a business person, and this is also a reminder to myself and my future self, if I'm listening to this, that you have to always kind of like keep your eye on expenses, keep your eye on the revenue. Even if you have like any sort of like medical stuff or distractions or whatever, you cannot take your eye off the ball, and you have to make sure that the company is generating revenue and expenses are kept low, because if you spend less than you make, then you'll always be all right. But if you spend more than you make, then you are in deep trouble. So just a quick reminder to my future self.